Jim Molan is a man we love to talk to about defence matters, but can we talk about some good news that you got today, mate? I saw you posted on socials. How are you holding up, and how successful is the treatment going for cancer?
Paul, good evening. Yeah, thank you very much for that. It is going well. I've had radiation now. I've had a course of chemo, and I've had my last chemo, which is fantastic. And that was 2 weeks ago, Paul. And it gives you a very interesting 7 or 10 days after it. So I've had about 4 days where I've been feeling quite frisky. So I apologise for that, but I must admit it's been a very refreshing feeling. But I am so lucky because I have learned so much in the last 5 months. I've learned so much about how others react to things that are far worse than I've had. So I've got to be grateful, very, very grateful.
How's it changed you as a bloke? Because obviously such a big part of your military career was about facing the concept of death and the gamble of that. But when you're facing sort of the long battle, how does it change you?
Well, it's been a very interesting experience in relation to that. I think I discovered that there is a word for how I have approached life for the last 40 or 50 years, and that's, I think I've been very, very stoic. I've accepted, I think for most of my military career, I accepted the fact that there was a very high probability of me being killed. And when this was announced to me very early on that it was a very aggressive form of cancer and that I should get my affairs in order, it really didn't affect me, except when I suddenly realised at my advanced age that those around me were being affected far, far worse than I was. As I say to people, Paul, if this had have happened to me 20 years ago, I'd be a much better person than I am now.
Well, congrats to your family for being able to enjoy the best of you for a very long time to come, mate. And, just keep the finger paint on because, it works. Now, let's talk about the subs, right? Now, we've gone back and forth about subs before when we've debated whether it was the right thing or wrong thing. The decision has now been made, and it is a huge step up from where we were with the French. How does this fit into that overall suggestion that you've been making about being able to be reliant so that if we had to have a deterrent or an ability to go on the offensive for whatever reason, that this arsenal helps us get there?
Well, I think we've got to look at what was announced last week and what is about to be announced this week in the Quad plus the subs as one package. And the alliances that are now being refreshed, such as ANZUS, which is the 1950 alliance, the Quad, which the PM has flown overseas for now, the technology access we're going to get, the moves to get us to produce missiles in Australia, plus to buy them, and the subs, all affect where we are at the moment in a different way. It's very, very interesting. The subs in particular are a very good long-term plan. We are going to get these subs, according to the Prime Minister, sometime in the next decade. And the only challenge that's going to present us with is that most of the predictions on the war that we are very concerned about, that is what people refer to as the Taiwan scenario, and therefore a war with China which follows. And part of the announcement last week has locked us. If we weren't locked in by ANZUS, Paul, we are locked in very much by the Australia, UK, US alliance, which will be signed off this week. All of this means that we're doing something in the long term. My deep concern is what are we going to do from tomorrow until we get these subs? The subs do not solve. They're fabulous. There's no two ways about it. But they don't solve the problem that we've got in being self-reliant and resilient as a nation, and having a military which is lethal, which is sustainable, and which is big enough.
Yeah, I talked about this with Catherine McGregor, and I'm going to repeat what might be considered a stupid question by people like yourself who know what they're talking about in all of this. Presumably under deals like this, there would be a couple of subs that the US might end up putting around Australia for us to familiarise ourselves with the technology, because buried in all of those different announcements was Peter Dutton saying there would be more American troops here, there would be more American hardware that would be here as part of a strategic deployment. We know about places like Darwin. Is that likely? That obviously we know to actually get our hands on one of these under our own flag is a long way off, but do you think that there would be a deployment of existing technology that would be similar to what we're buying?
Well, that's quite possible. And I saw Peter Dutton asked that only the other day, and he said, yes, we will investigate that, and we will investigate leasing and using the subs which are sailing around the world at the moment to put Australian crew on to make them familiar. He did point out at the time that because the Americans are in the biggest submarine building program by dollar terms since the 1950s, because they are so concerned about China, that our ability to actually take a sub and keep it ourselves is likely to be very, very low. So I would say that leasing is, I guess it might be possible, but I think it's very unlikely. More likely are our ability to put our crew members on American nukes that are around the world. And at the moment, in the Pacific, it's estimated that right now there are probably 11 Virginia-class attack submarines somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, probably in the Western Pacific. If tension increases and there is a problem, that can probably be increased to 11 in a period of weeks. To 22, to double to 22 in a period of weeks. Now, that's still not many submarines. Still not many submarines, and the Chinese are getting better and better. And those subs are fantastic if they can stay in deep water, and maybe they're a little less resilient if they have got to go into shallow water to do something. The biggest problem, I think, Paul, for us is that most Australians don't realise the nature of the war. We are now deeply concerned about our relationship with China. Therefore, we're buying nuclear submarines. The question I have is, what else do we need? What else do we need in the nation, and not just the ADF, in the nation and the ADF, if we're facing such an appalling strategic environment?
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to talk to you, mate. And obviously, I won't get you into trouble, but watch this space, I think, is the between the lines about the next few days when it comes to the Quad. Thank you, Senator.
Absolutely.
And good on you for fighting hard, mate. Thank you very much. Do appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul.
He's a good man, isn't he?